You are watching an ORACLOUD Plus Training as a Service video snippet. Snippets are concise, targeted tutorials explaining how to use, configure, integrate, deploy, and support Oracle's Fusion Cloud applications. Snippets are delivered via FAST, the Fusion Application Support Tool. FAST is accessible via the web at www.oracloud.plus. No more watching hours of Learning Path style videos to get to the 5-minute snippet you need. Learn Oracle's Fusion Cloud applications in minutes, not hours. Hello and welcome to the Supplier Registration Overview video presentation. This video is intended for beginners looking to learn more about Fusion's supplier registration capabilities. It explains the what, where, when, why, who, and how for Fusion's Procurement Cloud supplier registration functional work area. This video snippet, as with all ORACLOUD Plus video snippets, can be found within FAST, our Fusion Application Support Tool. Within FAST, go to the Procurement Cloud Training Group and the Supplier Registration Training Center. It's under the Learn menu option. To request access to FAST, email us at access@oracloud.plus. Please include your name and contact information in the body of the email and set the title to FAST Access Request. Okay, so let's go through the key topics for this presentation. First, what is supplier registration? Next, who registers? Then, how do suppliers register? When do suppliers register? What is the supplier registration process? So this is a little different. We actually included a swim lane business process flow here. And then lastly, why do suppliers register? So let's get started. Okay, what is supplier registration? Supplier registration is the process of a supplier requesting self-service access to its customers' procurement applications in order to create, change, and view mutual transactions. You see a graphic a little bit expressing that on the bottom, and then a very small picture of the external supplier registration page, but we'll see a bigger picture here in a little bit. One note before we move forward. First, suppliers access their customers via what's called a supplier portal, usually. That's how they get there. They may register in this page, but there's a portal to do the actual access. It's their homepage, if you will. Suppliers register as prospective suppliers, meaning like bidders, or spend authorized is full blown. So a bidder can only participate in sourcing, whereas the spend authorized can do sourcing, invoicing, paying, ordering, etc. And then lastly, it's worth noting that contractual counterparties also register as supplier contacts. They don't have to. You could register them individually as Bob, John, and Susan, but it's a lot more work in order to add them in the resource directory prior. But that's enterprise contracts. It's just pointing out that contractual counterparties are also registering as suppliers most often. Okay, so another slide, who registers? So we're given some actual examples, but the term supplier can encompass a wide range of, let's call them payees. So it could be suppliers in the prototypical sense. It could be refund distributions from some other application, a non-tax reimbursement recipient. And like we said earlier, it could be contractual counterparties. There's lots of different payees. And this is in line with what you see in the supplier and supplier contact management overview video presentation. So it's really reinforcing that. That's a good video also to watch with this registration video. Okay, so how do my suppliers or payees register? Well, it's a couple different ways. We really tout the external supplier registration, but there is a variant of this where people who are not procurement inside of an organization can register OBO, or what they call on behalf of a supplier, but we're really focused here on the external registration. Largely the same data set, but there's some additional functionality. And then obviously this is best practice because it's self-service to get the supplier the free labor to create the transaction. So you can see in the image center towards the left that there's 8 different steps. The 8th is just a review, but those 6 steps collect lots of data elements. And you can set up rules inside of the registration application that allow you to ask one or more question groupings based on the values that the supplier registrant has answered or provided. One other thing that's worth noting here, remember they are still a registrant. This is not a supplier yet. When they're done and they click that save for later or register button, they then become a registration transaction. They need to be approved before they become a supplier. So on that, or in that vein, let's talk about when do suppliers register. So you can see, as always, this is the FPC, Fusion Procurement Cloud Overview Single Slide Flow. And procurement breaks down into two services, purchasing services and sourcing. So when you're talking about registration, the idea that you're doing self-service procurement, meaning requesters searching for content, putting it on a rec, submitting for approval, auto-generating an order, right? This is not invoking supplier registration. But when you don't find an item, that being the requester doesn't find an item and they complete their non-catalog request, well, then somebody has to make a decision about whether the supplier you want to use or all the suppliers you may want to ask or have competitive bids with, do they exist in the application? And if not, then you get the possibility of adding a supplier. And if you're going to add a supplier, particularly if you're going to add more than one supplier, you may want to have them register. And so that is when this registration transaction occurs. So like we said, here's something that's a little bit different. Internally, we have what's called an FPC BPA. That's the Fusion Procurement Cloud Business Process Architecture flows. This particular flow is a generic flow that walks you through the register a new supplier. And the swim lanes are related to different roles, or rather users and roles. They're in the left-hand margin of the swim lanes. And those correspond with the seeded data inside of Fusion or Oracle Procurement Cloud, the Demo Central environments. And so this is largely a requester asking a supplier, Ryan Lee, to register. Ryan registers. They go back and forth with the internal procurement manager to get the data on the registration correctly, and then have somebody over in AP, who's a supplier manager, approve that transaction. And so a little bit of nuance depends. Are you registering to be a bidder, registering to be a supplier? And there's a series of steps that differ a little bit, but that's the general process for the supplier registration. Okay, so lastly, why do suppliers register? Well, obviously there's a productivity element down there on number 4. Sorry, going in reverse order, I guess, a little bit. But that's really the largest reason. You want increased productivity, and you can have the supplier do all this labor, and you don't have to invoke anybody inside your organization procurement until the supplier's completed this registration process. Well, what does it do? Well, it captures certifications. So think about insurance or design certifications, or maybe supplier diversity. You can capture banking info. You can actually have the supplier self-classify, and that classify may be your taxonomy of purchasing. It may be something different that you can define, or your consultants, administrators can define what that taxonomy is. And there's a host of other steps, addresses, contacts, etc. But it's largely around, this is a big process, and the larger the supplier, the larger the process. So why not try to make it self-service and get the supplier, get the process started. And then, like we saw on the slide before, you can go back and forth to make sure all the information is ultimately correct before allowing this to get approved or submitted for approval. Okay, so are you ready for the next video? Well, do you understand what supplier registrations are, when they're created, who creates them, how they're created, etc.? If the answer is no, then either watch again or feel free to reach out to me directly. You can see here on the left, that's my email address, and I'm always available to answer questions. If the answer is yes, great, then maybe you want to watch more video. So you can go to our playlist out on YouTube by going to YouTube and searching on ORACLOUD Plus Inc. Or you can go from our website to the tool we call FAST, the Fusion Application Support Tool, and you can access the full catalog of our Learn, Use, Configure, Integrate, Deploy, and Support videos online. So that's it for this tutorial. We hope you found it informative, and keep watching.